The rain hammered against the windows like bullets as Sterling George shoved another box across the floor, her 7-month pregnant belly making every movement an agony. Her daughter Erica lay on the couch, burning with fever, her small chest rising and falling in laboured breaths that filled Sterling with a terror she couldn't name. You are welcome to Heart Stories. This is the story of a young man with greed who abandoned his pregnant wife and a 7-year-old sick daughter for his wife's best friend, for wealth, power, and fame. Stay with me till the end, because what happens next will blow your mind. Could you please hit subscribe button, comment, like, share your thought, and tell us where you are watching from. I said, be out by midnight, Sterling. Derek's voice cut through the storm like ice. He stood in the doorway, designer suit, still pristine from whatever meeting he'd abandoned her for. Behind him, Vanessa Harper, Sterling's best friend since college, draped herself against the frame, her red lips curved in a smile that Sterling no longer recognized. Sterling's hands trembled as she wrapped Erica's stuffed rabbit in newspaper. She has a fever of 103, the hospital said. The hospital can wait until you're gone. Vanessa stepped inside, her Louboutin heels clicking against the hardwood Sterling had spent 3 years saving to install. Honestly, Derek, I don't know how you lived like this. These walls are practically beige. Sterling looked up at the woman who'd held her hand through Erica's diagnosis 2 years ago, who'd sworn they'd fight the illness together, who'd brought soup and stayed up through endless nights in sterile hospital rooms. Vanessa, please, just give me until morning. Erica can't be moved in this condition. Vanessa examined her manicured nails. Not my problem anymore, sweetie. Derek and I have a flight to Monaco at 6 a.m. His new father-in-law is introducing him to the board of Harper Global Estates. We can't be late for a billion-dollar opportunity because you're dragging your feet. The words hit Sterling like a physical blow. Father-in-law? You're married. Derek had the decency to look away. 3 weeks ago, in Vegas, we didn't want to make it complicated. Complicated. Sterling's voice came out flat, empty. She looked down at her swollen belly, at their unborn son, who kicked against her ribs, as if sensing the destruction of their world. We're still married, Derek. Legally married. That's what lawyers are for. Vanessa pulled a manila envelope from her purse and tossed it onto the coffee table. Divorce papers! Derek's attorney says if you sign tonight, you'll get $5,000. Refuse, and you get nothing. We both know you can't afford a legal fight. Sterling's vision blurred. $5,000. Their rent alone was $1,800 a month. Erica's medication cost $700 weekly. The new baby would need diapers, formula, clothes. $5,000 wouldn't last 2 months. Derek. She forced herself to look at him, at the man she'd met at community college 9 years ago, the man who'd promised her the world while she worked 3 jobs to put him through business school. Look at me, please. He met her eyes for just a moment before turning away. You held me back, Sterling. Your student loans, Erica's medical bills, your dead-end waitressing job. Vanessa's family has connections I could never have with you. Her father's making me VP of International Acquisitions. Do you understand what that means? I'll be making more in a month than you made in your entire life. I put you through school. Sterling's voice cracked. I worked doubles at the diner while you studied. I ate ramen for 2 years so you could have textbooks and interview suits. I believed in you when no one else did. And I'm grateful. Derek's tone suggested he was anything but. That's why I'm giving you the $5,000. Take it and go quietly, or fight me and end up with nothing. Erica stirred on the couch, her voice small and cracked. Daddy, why is Aunt Nessa being mean to Mommy? Vanessa laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. Because your mommy is being difficult, sweetheart. But don't worry, you won't have to deal with any of this much longer. Sterling moved between Vanessa and her daughter, with a speed that surprised them all. "Don't you dare speak to her." "Or what?" Vanessa stepped closer, her perfume, the same perfume Sterling had helped her pick out for her 30th birthday, overwhelming in the small space. "You'll fight me? Look at yourself, Sterling. You're broke, pregnant, with a sick kid, and no prospects. I'm doing you a favour by taking him off your hands. He deserves better than this pathetic life you've built. We built it together." But even as Sterling said it, she knew it was a lie. She'd built everything while Derek coasted on her sacrifice, and now he was abandoning the foundation she'd laid for something shinier, newer, easier. Derek walked to the mantel and picked up the ornate silver frame that held Sterling's grandmother's photograph. Grandmother Elise, who'd raised Sterling after her parents died, who'd taught her that dignity and hard work mattered more than money, who'd passed away 3 months ago in a nursing home Sterling could barely afford. "I'm taking this." Derek turned the frame over, examining the hallmark. Victorian silver, worth at least $3,000. "Consider it payment for the headache you've caused me. That's my grandmother's." Sterling reached for it, but Derek held it above his head, knowing she couldn't reach in her condition. "It's all I have left of her. Should have thought of that before you trapped me with a sick kid and another baby I didn't want." Derek slipped the frame into his briefcase. "Clock's ticking, Sterling. Sign the papers, or I'll have the police remove you for trespassing. This apartment's in my name, remember?" Of course she remembered. He'd insisted on it for tax purposes, he'd said, for simplicity, and she'd trusted him because she'd loved him and believed love meant something. Sterling looked at her daughter, at the cracked ceiling she'd stared at through countless sleepless nights, at the walls that held 9 years of memories now revealed as lies. She thought about fighting, about refusing, about making him drag her out in front of witnesses. But Erica was sick, and the baby was coming in 2 months, and she had $47 in her checking account. She signed the papers. Vanessa snatched them up with a triumphant smile. "Smart choice. Derek, darling, call the car. I want to be out of this depressing neighborhood before someone steals our luggage." Derek paused at the door, and for a moment Sterling thought he might apologize, might show some shred of the man she'd married. Instead, he said, "You were a good wife when we had nothing, Sterling, but I need a woman who can help me become something. Vanessa understands ambition." Then they were gone, and Sterling was alone with her feverish daughter and the ruins of her life. The Sunset Motel smelled like cigarettes and defeat. Sterling counted the crumpled bills for the 3rd time, her hands shaking so badly she had to start over. $47. She'd found a 5 in her coat pocket that she'd forgotten about, which brought her total to 52. The motel clerk had taken pity on her and charged only $38 for the night after seeing Erica's condition. That left $14 for everything else. Sterling sat in the bathroom with the water running so Erica wouldn't hear her cry. The fluorescent light flickered and buzzed, and through the thin walls she could hear a couple arguing, furniture scraping, doors slamming. She'd never imagined her life would come to this. She'd graduated high school with honours, had been accepted to 3 universities, had plans and dreams and a future that sparkled with possibility. Then her parents died in a car accident when she was 19, leaving her to care for grandmother Elise while working her way through community college. Then she'd met Derek, charming and ambitious, and so sure of himself that she'd believed in his dreams more than her own. Then Erica was born and diagnosed with juvenile idiopathic arthritis at age 3, and Sterling's dreams got packed away like childhood toys, gathering dust in an attic she could no longer afford to access. Her phone buzzed against the cracked tile. Another text from the debt collector. $8,400 owed to St. Mary's Hospital. Final notice before legal action. She deleted it without reading the full message and opened her email instead. 17 job applications, 17 rejections. She was overqualified for minimum wage positions and underqualified for anything that paid enough to matter. Her most recent work history was 5 years at Joe's Diner, slinging hash browns and accepting tips from truckers who sometimes got handsy when she bent to wipe their tables. She'd been good at it, though. She'd smiled through the exhaustion and the degradation because Erica needed her medication and Derek needed his business school tuition, and Sterling George had been raised to believe that hard work and perseverance built character and eventually led to better days. What a stupid thing to believe. Sterling turned off the water and composed herself. She found Erica awake, her dark eyes too bright with fever, her small hand clutching the stuffed rabbit that was missing an ear from too many washings. "Mommy, I'm thirsty." Sterling poured tap water into a plastic cup and helped Erica drink. The prescription bottle on the nightstand was nearly empty. 3 pills left. The refill cost $240, and her insurance had been through Derek's employer, which meant she no longer had coverage. She'd have to take Erica to the emergency room if the fever didn't break, which would mean another bill she couldn't pay, another debt collector calling at odd hours, another reason for the world to remind her that she was failing at the most basic requirement of motherhood: keeping her child alive. "Are we going home tomorrow?" Erica's voice was small, hopeful. Sterling smoothed her daughter's damp hair back from her forehead. "This is home now, baby. Just for a little while. We're on an adventure, remember? Like the pioneers we learned about in your history book. Pioneers had wagons. We have a motel." Despite everything, Sterling almost smiled. Erica had always been sharp, too smart for easy lies. "You're right. We're more like explorers then, discovering new places. Can Daddy come explore with us?" The question pierced Sterling's chest like a blade. "Daddy's busy with work, sweetheart. He's on his own adventure right now." "With Aunt Nessa?" Sterling's throat tightened. "Yes." "I don't like Aunt Nessa anymore. She was mean to you." Sometimes grown-ups are mean when they're confused about what they want. Sterling didn't know why she was making excuses for them. Maybe because explaining adult cruelty to a 5-year-old felt impossible. Maybe because admitting that Erica's father was a selfish coward and her godmother was a calculating snake felt like admitting Sterling had been too stupid to see the truth. Erica's eyes drifted closed again, and Sterling sat watching her breathe, counting each rise and fall of her small chest like a prayer. The baby kicked hard against Sterling's ribs, a reminder that in 2 months there would be another mouth to feed, another person depending on her to somehow conjure stability from nothing. Her phone rang, unknown number, probably another debt collector, but she answered anyway, because ignoring problems had never made them disappear. "Ms. Sterling George." The voice was male, British, unexpectedly refined. "Yes." "My name is Reginald Bradford. I'm with Bradford and Associates, estate law specialists in London. We've been attempting to reach you for approximately 6 weeks regarding your grandmother, Mrs. Elise Chen George's estate." Sterling's chest tightened. "There is no estate. The nursing home costs took everything. I had to sell her furniture just to cover the last month. I understand that's what you believed, Ms. George. However, your grandmother maintained certain private investments that were separate from her domestic accounts. She was quite deliberate about keeping them confidential. Mr. Bradford, I appreciate you calling, but I really don't have time for this. My daughter is sick and I need to take her to the hospital. Ms. George, your grandmother's private portfolio is currently valued at approximately $847 million. You are the sole beneficiary." The phone slipped from Sterling's hand, clattering against the cheap linoleum. She stared at it, at the tiny speaker still emitting Bradford's voice, asking if she was still there, if she'd heard him correctly. $847 million. The number was so absurd it couldn't be real. It had to be a scam, some cruel trick designed to extract what little she had left. She picked up the phone with numb fingers. "This isn't funny. I assure you, Miss George, this is entirely legitimate. Your grandmother was a remarkable woman. She escaped Shanghai in 1949 with nothing but the clothes on her back and her mother's jade bracelet. She built a textile manufacturing business in San Francisco, sold it in 1995 for $80 million, and invested everything in emerging technology companies. Microsoft, Apple, Amazon in its earliest days. She lived modestly because she wanted you to inherit this wealth when you truly needed it, not when life was comfortable." Sterling's vision blurred. That's not possible. She lived in a one-bedroom apartment. She shopped at thrift stores. She was extraordinarily disciplined and private about her wealth. "I have documentation, Ms. George. Transfer papers, investment portfolios, her last will and testament, recorded with our firm in 1998 and updated annually until her death. She left specific instructions that we were to contact you only after the probate was complete. That process concluded last week." "Why didn't she tell me?" Sterling's voice broke. "I was struggling. Erica was sick. She watched me work myself to exhaustion and never said anything." Bradford's voice softened with something like sympathy. "She left you a letter. With your permission, I'll read it to you now." Sterling nodded, then realized he couldn't see her. "Yes, please." There was a rustling of paper, and then Bradford began to read in Grandmother Elise's voice, the cadence so familiar it brought fresh tears. "My dearest Sterling, if you are hearing this letter, I am gone, and you have likely faced great hardship. This is intentional, though it pains me to cause you suffering. I lived through war, through poverty so severe I ate tree bark to survive, through discrimination and hatred and loss that would have destroyed a weaker woman. I learned that comfort breeds complacency, but struggle breeds strength. I wanted you to discover your own resilience before inheriting this wealth, because money without character is a curse, not a blessing. You have worked 3 jobs. You have sacrificed your own dreams for others. You have shown more grace in your hardest moments than most people show in their easiest. Now you are ready. This money is not a gift. It is a tool. Use it to build the life I could only dream of when I was your age. Never let desperation make you small. You are enough. You have always been enough. Your loving grandmother, Elise." Sterling sat on the stained motel carpet and sobbed until her throat was raw. Erica slept through it, her fever finally breaking as dawn light crept through the thin curtains. Bradford waited patiently on the phone, his breathing steady and calm, until Sterling could speak again. "What do I do now?" she finally asked. "Now, Ms. George, you come to my office and we begin the transfer process. I'll email you the address. Can you be there by 10 o'clock? Sterling looked at her daughter, at the $14 that remained of her entire net worth, at the future that had just cracked open like a door she'd thought was permanently locked. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I can." 47th floor of the Sentinel Tower, all glass and steel and the kind of quiet that only extreme wealth could buy. Sterling stood in the elevator watching the numbers climb, Erica's hand small and warm in hers. She'd washed their clothes in the motel sink and dried them with the ancient hairdryer bolted to the bathroom wall. They looked shabby, but clean, and Sterling held her head high because Grandmother Elise had taught her that dignity cost nothing and was worth everything. Reginald Bradford was exactly what his voice had suggested, elderly, impeccably dressed, with kind eyes that had seen too much of life's cruelty to judge anyone harshly. He offered Erica a lollipop from a crystal jar on his desk, and she took it shyly, staying close to Sterling's side. First, the documentation. Bradford slid a leather folder across his mahogany desk. "Your grandmother's original will. The investment portfolios with current valuations, property deeds, trust fund structures she established for various charitable purposes. Everything is in order. I'll need your signature in approximately 40 places, and then we can begin the transfer process. Sterling's hand shook as she opened the folder. The numbers seemed impossible, almost obscene. 847 million in liquid assets, another 60 million in real estate holdings scattered across 3 continents. Trust funds totaling 90 million designated for various causes. Education for immigrant children, medical research for juvenile arthritis, women's entrepreneurship programs. She did all this. Sterling's voice was barely a whisper. Over the course of 50 years. Yes, your grandmother was brilliant with investments. She had an instinct for recognizing potential before it became obvious. She bought Amazon stock in 1997 when people thought online bookstores were a foolish venture. She invested in a small company called Google in 1998. She understood that the future belonged to information technology when most investors were still focused on manufacturing and real estate. Sterling read through Grandmother Elise's will, and with each paragraph she discovered a woman she'd never fully known. Her grandmother had funded scholarships for hundreds of students, had built hospitals in rural China, and had quietly paid the medical bills of families who thought their insurance had miraculously improved. All of it done anonymously, all of it managed from her small apartment with its thrift store furniture and discount groceries. Why did she live like that? Sterling asked. She could have had anything. She told me once that she'd already escaped death and poverty, which meant everything else was bonus time. She said excess dulled the senses and made people forget what truly mattered. She was happiest with her books and her garden and her Sunday phone calls with you. Those Sunday calls. Sterling remembered them so clearly now. Grandmother Elise asked about her dreams, about whether Derek treated her well, about Erica's health and Sterling's happiness, always listening, never judging, offering wisdom wrapped in stories about surviving Shanghai's fall to communism, about building a business as a Chinese woman in 1960s San Francisco, about the importance of knowing one's own worth, regardless of external validation. She'd been preparing Sterling for this moment all along. Bradford produced the letter, the actual physical paper covered in Grandmother Elise's careful handwriting. Sterling held it like the sacred object it was, reading the words again, hearing her grandmother's voice in every line. When she finished, she folded it carefully and placed it in her purse next to the $14 that had seemed so desperately important just hours ago. What happens now? She asked. Now we implement the transfer. I recommend establishing a new banking relationship with a private wealth management firm. You'll need a team, a financial advisor, a tax attorney, an accountant, possibly a security consultant given the amount involved. I can provide recommendations, or you can choose your own. The important thing is to move carefully and deliberately.
How long until I can access the money? For immediate needs, I can authorize a transfer of $1 million to a temporary account within the hour. The full transfer will take approximately 2 weeks to process through the various institutions and jurisdictions involved. $1 million within the hour. Sterling tried to process that and failed. Yesterday she had $47. Today she had more money than she could spend in 10 lifetimes. Erica needs
medical treatment, she said. Specialized care. There's a new immunotherapy protocol at Children's Memorial Hospital, but it costs. Cost is no longer a concern, Miss George. What is the name of Erica's physician? Dr. Sarah Winters at County General. Bradford made a note. I'll have my assistant contact her immediately. Whatever Erica needs, she'll have it. Sterling looked at her daughter, who was examining a globe on Bradford's desk, spinning it slowly, and pointing out countries she recognized from her picture books. Erica had lived with pain and sickness for so long that she'd stopped complaining about it, had learned to push through fevers and joint aches with a stoicism that broke Sterling's heart. Now that could end. Now Erica could be a normal child, running and playing without wondering if her body would betray her. "I want custody arrangements formalized," Sterling said, her voice hardening. "My ex-husband abandoned Erica when she was sick. He doesn't get to come back now. I know an excellent family law attorney. She's aggressive and thorough. Good. I also want to know about buying property, specifically the Meridian Hotel on 5th and Park." Bradford's eyebrows rose slightly. "The Meridian is a landmark property. The current owners have resisted all purchase offers for years. Everyone has a price, Mr. Bradford. Find out what theirs is." Something that might have been approval flickered in Bradford's eyes. "May I ask why the Meridian?" Sterling smiled, and it wasn't entirely kind. "My ex-husband is having his engagement party there next month. I'd like to own the building when he does." Bradford allowed himself a small smile. "I'll make the inquiries. Now let's get these documents signed so we can begin improving your circumstances." The signing took 90 minutes. Sterling's hand cramped by the end, but she didn't care. Each signature was a step away from the motel room, from the debt collectors, from the humiliation of counting pennies and choosing between medicine and food. Each signature was a step toward the life grandmother Elise had wanted for her. When they finished, Bradford stood and offered his hand. "Your grandmother was one of the most impressive people I've ever known, Miss George. I have no doubt you'll honour her legacy." "I'm going to try." "One more thing." Bradford retrieved a small jewellery box from his desk drawer. "She wanted you to have this." Inside was Grandmother Elise's jade bracelet, the one she'd carried from Shanghai, the one she'd worn every day for 70 years. Sterling slipped it onto her wrist, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. They left Bradford's office and took a taxi to Children's Memorial Hospital, where Dr. Winters agreed to see Erica immediately despite having a full schedule. Sterling didn't mention the money, just explained that Erica's insurance situation had changed and that cost was no longer a barrier to treatment. Dr. Winters was a woman in her 50s with grey streaks in her black hair and the competent warmth of someone who genuinely loved her work. She examined Erica thoroughly, asked detailed questions about her symptoms and medication history, and then sat down and across from Sterling with the kind of serious expression that usually preceded bad news. "The good news is that Erica is an excellent candidate for the new immunotherapy protocol," Dr. Winters said. "It's shown remarkable results in early trials. We're seeing complete remission in approximately 78% of pediatric arthritis cases. And the bad news? It's a 6-month treatment program with intensive monitoring. Erica will need to stay in the hospital for the first 3 weeks, then return for weekly infusions and checkups. It's demanding, but if it works, and I believe it will, she could be completely symptom-free within a year." Sterling felt tears sliding down her cheeks and didn't bother wiping them away. "When can we start?" "Tomorrow, if you'd like. I'll have admissions prepare a private suite for Erica. Make it comfortable. Bring whatever she needs from home. This is going to be a marathon, not a sprint." "We don't have a home right now," Sterling admitted. "We're staying at a motel while I look for an apartment." Dr. Winters didn't judge, didn't ask questions that didn't matter. "Then bring what you have. We'll make it work." Sterling enrolled Erica for treatment that afternoon, and then she did something she'd never imagined doing. She walked into the Ritz-Carlton and booked a 2-bedroom suite for a month. The desk clerk looked sceptical when Sterling appeared in her worn clothes with a small, sick child and no luggage, But the credit card Bradford had provided worked perfectly, and skepticism transformed into obsequious courtesy. The suite had the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a living room larger than their old apartment, and a bathroom with marble floors and a tub big enough to swim in. Erica stood in the centre of the living room, turning in slow circles, her eyes huge. "Is this really ours, Mommy?" "For now, baby. Until we find something permanent." "It's like a castle." Sterling knelt down to her daughter's level, taking both her small hands in her own. "Erica, things are going to be very different now. Great-grandmother Elise left us some money, a lot of money, enough that we never have to worry about bills or medicine or having a place to live. Why didn't she tell us before? I think she wanted us to learn how to be strong first, to know we could survive hard things." "Did we survive?" Sterling pulled Erica into a hug, breathing in the scent of her daughter's hair, feeling the miracle of her solid warmth. "Yes, baby. We survived." That night, after Erica fell asleep in a bed with sheets that probably cost more than Sterling used to make in a week, Sterling stood at the window looking out at the glittering city. Her phone showed 43 missed calls from Derek and 17 from Vanessa. She'd blocked their numbers after the first dozen, but they kept calling from different phones, leaving voicemails that Sterling deleted without listening to. They didn't matter anymore. They were part of a life that had ended the moment Derek walked out with Grandmother Elise's photograph tucked in his briefcase like stolen treasure. He'd wanted something valuable, and he'd found it. He just didn't know he'd already possessed the most valuable thing of all and thrown it away. Sterling placed her hand on her swollen belly, feeling her son kick against her palm. "You're going to have a different life," she whispered to him. "You're going to know your worth from the beginning, and you're going to have a mother who never forgets hers again." In 2 weeks, she'd complete the financial transfers. In 6 weeks, the Meridian Hotel would be hers. In 8 weeks, Derek would have his engagement party in a building Sterling owned, and he'd finally understand exactly what he'd lost. But tonight, she simply stood at the window and let herself feel safe for the first time in years. 3 months transformed Sterling George from a woman drowning in debt to someone who moved through the world with quiet confidence. She didn't flaunt her wealth, didn't trade her practical clothes for designer labels or her sensible sedan for a sports car. Instead, she focused on building a foundation that couldn't be shaken by betrayal or circumstance. Erica's treatment was working. The immunotherapy had been brutal at first, leaving her exhausted and nauseous. But Dr. Winters had been right. By week 8, Erica's joint pain had decreased noticeably. By week 12, she was running in the hospital corridors, laughing with other children, her cheeks pink with health instead of fever. The doctors were cautiously optimistic about complete remission, and Sterling allowed herself to hope in a way she hadn't dared before. She'd given birth to her son, Marcus, in a private suite at the same hospital. Derek had signed away his parental rights without protest in exchange for Sterling dropping all claims for child support. She'd agreed immediately, wanting nothing from him that could tie them together. Marcus was perfect, healthy, and hers alone. The Meridian Hotel purchase had gone through without complications once Sterling's attorneys made it clear that money wasn't an obstacle. She'd kept the existing management team, but made it clear that she owned the property and approved all major events. When Derek's assistant called to confirm the engagement party details, Sterling's event coordinator had been professionally courteous and charged them triple the usual rate. They'd paid without questioning it. Now, Sterling stood in front of her closet in the penthouse she'd purchased overlooking the park, considering her options for the evening. She'd hired a stylist, not because she cared about fashion, but because she understood that appearance was a weapon in certain circles. and tonight she intended to be armed. The emerald gown was elegant without being flashy, expensive without screaming its price tag. She paired it with grandmother Elise's jade bracelet and a pair of pearl earrings that had belonged to her mother. Her hair was styled in a simple updo, her makeup subtle and sophisticated. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a woman who'd survived hell and emerged stronger for it. "You look like a princess," Erica said from the doorway. She was wearing a matching emerald dress that made her look older than her 6 years, her dark hair pulled back with a velvet ribbon. "You look like a princess too, sweetheart." Sterling knelt to adjust Erica's collar. "Are you sure you want to come tonight? You could stay here with Marcus and Mrs. Chen. I want to see Daddy's face when he realizes," Erica said, with a seriousness that was both heartbreaking and satisfying. She'd stopped asking about Derek weeks ago, had accepted with the brutal pragmatism of children that some people simply weren't worth missing. The Meridian's grand ballroom was decorated with white roses and crystal chandeliers, every detail expensive and tasteless. Sterling paused in the entryway, taking in the crowd of Derek's business school friends and Vanessa's social climbing acquaintances. They were the kind of people who measured worth in salary figures and square footage, who'd never understand the difference between price and value. James Beaumont appeared at her elbow like a thought made manifest. They'd met 6 weeks ago at a fundraiser for the Children's Hospital wing Sterling had endowed in grandmother Elise's name. He was a widower, a philanthropist, a man who'd inherited wealth but chose to do something meaningful with it. They'd talked for 3 hours about everything except money, and he'd called the next day to ask if she'd like to have coffee sometime. Tonight he was her date, and her reminder that not all wealthy people were cruel or shallow. Some of them understood that privilege came with responsibility. "Ready?" he asked quietly. "Absolutely." They entered together, and Sterling watched the wave of recognition ripple through the crowd. Whispers spread like wildfire. "That's Sterling George, the Chen estate heiress. She's worth nearly $1 billion. She owns this hotel. Derek's ex-wife, the woman he threw out when she was pregnant." Derek stood near the champagne fountain, Vanessa clinging to his arm in a dress that cost too much and flattered too little. His face went pale when he saw Sterling, his champagne flute frozen halfway to his lips. Sterling walked directly to them, her head high, Erica's hand warm in hers. The crowd parted instinctively, sensing drama, phones already appearing to document whatever happened next. "Derek, Vanessa." Sterling's voice was pleasant, conversational. "Congratulations on your engagement. The ballroom looks lovely." Derek's mouth opened and closed without sound. Vanessa had gone rigid, her carefully applied makeup unable to hide the panic in her eyes. "Sterling." Derek finally found his voice. "I didn't know you'd be here. I thought that I'd still be living in that motel room." Sterling smiled. "No, Derek. Things have changed considerably since you stole my grandmother's photograph." "I didn't steal it. I took it as compensation." "For abandoning your sick daughter and pregnant wife?" Sterling's voice remained pleasant, but the words cut like broken glass. "That's an interesting legal theory. I'm sure my attorneys would love to discuss it." The hotel manager appeared, looking uncomfortable. "Ms. George, is everything satisfactory?" "Everything's perfect, Michael. Mr. Lawson and Ms. Harper are my guests this evening. Please make sure they have whatever they need." Derek's face went from pale to grey. "Your guests? Sterling, what are you talking about?" "I own Meridian, Derek. I purchased it 8 weeks ago. Didn't Vanessa tell you? I thought her family had such extensive real estate connections." Every eye in the ballroom turned to Vanessa, who'd gone the colour of old milk. "Derek, let's go somewhere private." "No." Derek's voice was rising, desperation replacing confusion. "No, Sterling. Wait. I made a mistake. I see that now. Erica looks so healthy, and you look amazing. We could fix this. We could be a family again. We were never a family, Derek. We were a transaction. I gave everything, and you took it while planning your exit strategy with my best friend. Sterling turned to Vanessa. How's your father's real estate empire, by the way? Still expanding into Asia? Vanessa's carefully constructed facade shattered. There is no empire. I lied. My father owns one rental duplex in Queens. I thought Derek had money saved. I thought we'd pool our resources and build something together. You thought wrong. Derek's voice had gone cold with fury. You told me your family was worth hundreds of millions. And you told me you had a trust fund from your grandparents. Vanessa shot back. We both lied, Derek. The difference is I'm not the one who abandoned a sick child for a lie. The room had gone completely silent. Phones were recording from every angle. This would be all over social media within the hour, dissected and mocked and shared until Derek and Vanessa became cautionary tales about greed and karma. Sterling felt nothing but a distant pity. She'd imagined this moment during her darkest hours in the motel room, had fantasized about their humiliation and regret. Now that it was happening, she realized she didn't need their apology or their suffering. She needed nothing from them at all. Security will escort you out, Sterling said quietly. The event fee has been refunded to your account, Vanessa. I suggest you both leave quickly before this becomes more embarrassing than it already is. Sterling, please. Derek grabbed her arm, and immediately James stepped between them, his expression politely dangerous. Don't touch her, James said. Ever again. Derek's hand fell away. He looked at Sterling, at Erica, at the ruins of his carefully constructed new life, and something broke behind his eyes. I threw away everything, didn't I? No, Derek. You threw away your family while chasing money you thought would make you important. The irony is that you had access to more wealth than you could imagine, and you were too busy calculating my value in dollars to notice. Sterling adjusted Erica's ribbon, her touch gentle and deliberate. You taught me something valuable, though. You taught me that my worth isn't determined by someone else's ability to recognize it. Security appeared at the edges of the crowd, discreet but unmistakable. Vanessa was already heading for the exit, her heels clicking frantically against the marble floor, her designer clutch pressed against her chest like armor. Derek stood frozen for another moment, looking at Sterling as if seeing her for the first time. I loved you, he said finally. In the beginning, I really did, I know. But love without respect is just another form of using someone. Sterling's voice was steady, without anger or grief. I hope you find whatever you're looking for, Derek. I truly do. But you won't find it by measuring people against your ambition. Derek turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped, his expensive suit suddenly looking like a costume he'd worn to a party where he didn't belong. The crowd parted for him the way it had for Sterling, but this time the whispers were different, pathetic. Can you imagine throwing that away? She's worth almost $1 billion, and he left her for a fraud. What an idiot. Sterling didn't stay to hear them. She'd made her point simply by existing in a space Derek had tried to claim as his own. She took Erica's hand and nodded to James, and they left through a side entrance that led to the hotel's private garden. The night air was cool and clean, carrying the scent of jasmine from the carefully maintained flower beds. Erica ran ahead to examine a fountain, her laughter echoing off the stone walls. James stood beside Sterling in comfortable silence, understanding that some moments didn't need commentary. Do you feel better? He asked after a while. Sterling considered the question honestly. I thought I would. I thought watching him realize what he'd lost would feel like justice. But mostly, I just feel relieved that he's not my problem anymore. That's probably the healthiest response. James smiled. Though I admit the look on his face when you mentioned owning the hotel was fairly satisfying. A little satisfying, Sterling conceded. Is that terrible? It's human. You're allowed to enjoy small victories, especially after what you went through. James turned to face her fully. What happens now? Now I go home to my children. I finish setting up my grandmother's foundation properly. I start living the life she wanted me to have, not the one Derek tried to trap me in. And us? The question was tentative, hopeful. Is there an us in that future? Sterling looked at this man who'd appeared in her life at exactly the right moment, who'd never asked about her money or tried to fix her problems, who treated Erica and Marcus like they mattered because they were hers. She thought about trust and timing, about how Grandmother Elise had taught her that sometimes you had to survive the desert before you could appreciate the oasis. I think there could be, she said carefully, but I need time. I need to figure out who I am when I'm not fighting to survive or proving something to people who never mattered. I can wait. James took her hand, his grip warm and steady. I'm good at waiting for things that are worth it. Erica came running back, her dress grass-stained and her ribbon hanging loose, looking more like herself than she had in months. Mommy, there are koi fish in the fountain. Can we get koi fish for our balcony pond? We don't have a balcony pond, sweetheart. Can we get one? Sterling laughed, the sound surprising her with its genuine joy. Maybe. We'll talk about it. They walked back through the hotel, past the ballroom where the party had devolved into uncomfortable small talk and half-hearted dancing. Sterling's phone buzzed with messages from people she'd known in her old life, suddenly interested in reconnecting now that she had money. She deleted them without reading. The people who'd mattered had been there when she had nothing. Everyone else was just noise. At home, Mrs. Chen had Marcus already bathed and sleeping peacefully in his crib. Sterling paid her generously and sent her home in a car service, then tucked Erica into bed with her favourite story about a girl who discovered she was braver than she knew. Mommy, Erica's voice was sleepy, content. Are we going to be okay now? Sterling brushed hair back from her daughter's forehead, marvelling at the healthy colour in her cheeks, the steady rhythm of her breathing. Yes, baby, we're going to be more than okay. Because of great-grandma's money? Because we learned how to survive without it. The money is wonderful, but we would have been okay either way. We have each other, and that's what matters. Erica's eyes drifted closed, a small smile on her lips. Sterling sat with her until her breathing deepened into sleep, then went to check on Marcus. He was perfect, peaceful, unaware of the drama that had preceded his birth or the security his future now held. Sterling stood at her living room window, looking out at the city, Grandmother Elise's jade bracelet cool against her wrist. She thought about the woman who'd crossed an ocean with nothing, who'd built an empire through intelligence and discipline, who'd lived modestly while secretly ensuring her granddaughter would never have to choose between medicine and food. She thought about Derek standing in the ruins of his engagement party, finally understanding that he'd traded substance for appearance and lost everything that mattered. She thought about Vanessa, whose desperation to appear wealthy had cost her the one genuine friendship she'd probably ever had. Mostly, though, she thought about herself, about the woman who'd worked 3 jobs and never complained, about the mother who'd counted pills and rationed medicine and held her sick child through endless nights, about the person who'd signed divorce papers with shaking hands in a shabby apartment while her world collapsed. That woman had been stronger than she knew. That woman had survived because she'd had no other choice. And now that woman had choices, resources, and power. The question was, what she'd do with them. Sterling picked up her laptop and opened the file she'd been working on for weeks, the Elise Chen Foundation for Single Mothers. She'd already allocated $50 million for the initial endowment, had hired staff and rented office space, and begun the process of identifying families who needed help. Women like she'd been, trapped by circumstance and lack of resources, working themselves to exhaustion while the world ignored their struggle. She typed quickly, her vision clear. Emergency grants for medical expenses, childcare subsidies, job training programs, legal assistance for custody battles and divorce proceedings, housing support, mental health services, everything she'd needed and couldn't afford, now available to women who found themselves in the same desperate position. This was grandmother Elise's legacy, but it was also Sterling's. She understood poverty and desperation in a way that no amount of research could teach. She knew what it felt like to choose between feeding your child and buying medicine, to smile through humiliation because you needed the job, to watch your dreams die slowly under the weight of bills and obligations and other people's expectations. She would never forget that feeling, and she would spend the rest of her life making sure other women didn't have to endure it alone. Her phone buzzed. A text from James. "You were magnificent tonight. Sleep well." Sterling smiled and typed back. "Thank you for being there. See you Sunday for the museum trip with the kids." Wouldn't miss it. She set the phone down and returned to her work. Outside, the city glittered with possibility. Somewhere out there, Derek was probably drinking too much and wondering how he'd miscalculated so badly. Somewhere else, Vanessa was facing the social media storm that would follow her for years. Sterling felt no satisfaction in their suffering, no vindication in their fall. She simply felt free, free from the need to prove herself to people who'd never valued her, free from the fear that had governed her decisions for so long. Free to build something meaningful with the resources she'd inherited and the strength she'd earned. She worked until midnight, planning programs and allocating funds, then finally allowed herself to rest. Tomorrow, she'd take Erica for her follow-up appointment with Dr. Winters. Next week, she'd meet with the foundation board. Next month, she'd speak at a fundraiser for single mothers facing medical crises. She had a lifetime ahead of her, and she intended to fill it with purpose instead of revenge, with building instead of destroying, with helping instead of hoarding. Grandmother Elise had given her the tools. Derek had given her the motivation. But Sterling herself had provided the most important element, the courage to survive long enough to see this moment. As she drifted off to sleep in her comfortable bed, in her secure home, with her healthy children sleeping peacefully nearby, Sterling George finally understood what her grandmother had been trying to teach her all along. Worth wasn't something someone else gave you or took away. It was something you carried inside yourself, something that survived poverty and betrayal and loss, something that no amount of money could buy and no amount of cruelty could destroy. She'd always been enough. She'd just needed to lose everything to finally believe it. And now that she knew her worth, nothing and no one could ever make her forget it again. In real life, people like Derek never face consequences. Subscribe to this channel for stories where they do. Justice, revenge, villains burning. The only reason you won't subscribe is you support what he did. The end.